you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you do read it, you're misinformed. What is the long-term effect of too much information?
Information, I just need some information. I've been dying. Is it lack of education? I've been reading without any transformation. I'm addicted. Is it overstimulation? Hey.
Welcome to the Sixth Sense Report.
Hear ye, come one, come all. You are listening to the Sixth Sense Report with Joel Nikoloff and Darnell Samuels.
Dude, I'm kind of surprised. I think maybe we've touched this topic briefly, but for 155 episodes, we really haven't touched China. And, you know, the country, the way of life, and, you know, all that sort of entails on a global scale. I mean, you know, it's come up maybe in passing, obviously coronavirus conversations and, you know, the origins. But I really don't think we've discussed the country and their leadership in any regard.
Yeah, and also their impact on the world stage. Because I know I've had conversations with family and friends about China's impact in Jamaica, right? Much less Canada and across the world. So, yeah, you're right. You're 100% right. It's funny that we haven't had an episode on it, but I have a feeling we will definitely have to revisit this because there's just so many layers and issues that layers to China and issues that flow out of China. And we can thank one of our listeners, Trevor, for requesting this show. Shout out to Trevor.
Yeah, and you know, bringing up essentially, and this is I'll say the issue for me that's with what happened in 2020 and all that's gone on there, and the political NBA in China was like the hypocrisy was hitting me in the face every time. and like I don't mean it. I don't say that to diminish any sort of conversation that should or shouldn't have. Like that's not the point, right? Like the point though is that currently ongoing, the most egregious violation of group of people, right, with the Uyghur Muslims and what happened with the NBA sort of being silenced on any conversation on that topic. But they want to talk about other injustices and give it a full, you know, roll out the red carpet. Right? So to me, that's the hypocrisy. It's not the issues themselves, but the nature of the issues, obviously different. But, you know, let's say from a societal injustice perspective, they're both those type of topics. One of them gets a red carpet. One of them gets slap on the wrist, silence. You don't talk like that. It's, yeah, like I said, the hypocrisy was hitting me in the face every time, you know, that stuff was going on. Definitely. So for the listener, we're going to hit 3 points on about China. So one, we're going to look at Trudeau, his speech to the EU Parliament and his criticisms of Vladimir Putin. And so he gets criticized. I don't know if anybody saw the footage, but he gets criticized. And they said that he admires the Chinese in regards to their basic dictatorship. So that kind of was a point that we wanted to hit and address that event. And then the second one is on the Andrew Lawton show through True North. He had a show on the Chinafication of Canada. And then the listener Trevor sent us 2 articles in relation to, like Joel just said, China and the NBA, and so we'll hit that to close. And then the final question with the 2 cents would be, Joel and I will answer: is Canada being Chinafied? So just to go back to your Trudeau, just to make sure the listeners are aware, there's a quote, I think it's from when Trudeau was like first elected, or maybe when he was first running, and he has this comment: I have this admiration for China's basic dictatorship. And he's like, it has their ability, it's given them the ability. Yeah, that's what he said, right? So he has
so he really said that?
Yes, 100%. But this is like 2015, 2017 timeframe that he said that comment.
Okay.
And then his follow-up comment, which I disagree is true,
But he says, oh, because of their central planning, they have the ability to turn their economy around on a dime. So this is the context of that quote, the original quote. Now,
okay, I didn't know. I thought the person was just saying that.
You're seeing it show up in a lot of snippets. That clip. So a lot of people are criticizing Trudeau because of the Parliament. You know, the EU Parliament stuff is, let's just call it a dumpster fire. Like, you know, Trudeau's getting blasted by a handful of MPs from around the world.
Right. And hold on. And for the listeners, so on March 23rd, 2022, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau addresses the European Parliament in Brussels. The Prime Minister he was in Belgium on a 2-day official visit, during which he will also attending the meetings of the G7 and NATO leaders concerning the ongoing Russian invasion of the Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. And let's say some Canadian alternative media criticized that trip as a photo op, as opposed to, you know, something productive. So then you have Trudeau in the Parliament giving some speeches, and people are mocking him because the things he's saying are counter to the perspective the world has taken to his response to the trucker convoy. So he's making all these comments about, you know, protect democracies, you know, rights, all this, like, you know, language about the importance of upholding democracy. But he's receiving worldwide criticism for his handling and violating of rights of protesters. Right? The best example of this is when they had India had its convoys and protests, and this was the farmer concept or the farmer protest that we talked about. What was it called? No farmers, no food. Right? Around that time, there was a similar protest in, I want to say, India. And anyways, Trudeau was sort of giving some praise. Well, you have, you know, people from that country going like, oh, now that you have the, you know, you're not holding the same tune when it's in your country. And so the similar type of hypocritical criticisms towards Trudeau were happening in the Parliament. If you look at EU Parliament when Trudeau's giving a speech, nobody's there. Like, it's a ghost town. Most people have left. One of the MPs was like, why don't you spare us your presence and leave? Like, he was getting bombed. But anyways, so let's go back to the speech where he's criticizing Putin. What about that did you want to bring to the listeners' attention?
I thought, well, initially when I shout out to I think it was Phil Thomas sent it to me, and shout out to Phil Thomas and Afterwatch podcast and LeVar. You guys should check it out. Afterwatch is slamming. They give great reviews on shows, TV shows, and all that stuff. And okay, yeah. So Phil sent it to me, and when he sent it to me, I didn't really read the caption. I was like, if you know, Phil's one of those guys who never really sends me anything, but when he sends me something, you know, it's important. He's one of those guys, right? Mm-hmm. So he sent it to me, and I just watched it. I was like, okay, you know, Phil doesn't send me foolishness, so let me check it out. And so I was watching it, and you know, he was giving his speech, and he was talking about how, you know, we need to, you know, practice democracy, stand up for justice and people's freedoms. And as I was watching it, my biscuit started to bake. I was getting heated. My stomach was starting to turn. I was starting to feel sick. I felt like throwing my phone because he was, you know, I'm here, and to me, he sounds like a hypocrite, and he's just posturing, and it's just rubbing me the wrong way. And then it flips to that other MP person. I'm not sure her name. And then she launched off on him and called him out on the world, called the man out on the world stage. And afterwards I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. And the reason why I think it was important was because this was on the world stage. So sometimes we feel like, you know, like when you have drama in your own home.
Just for context, EU as opposed to UN, but basically the world stage. Sorry.
Well, I mean, when I mean world stage, I mean, I'm sure the clip went viral.
Okay.
And people seeing that. And so, you know, kind of like how you have issues in your own home, you know, you and Jenna have your issues. And sometimes you don't know how other people see you. And so it felt good. It felt good to know that people are seeing what's really going on over here. 'Cause sometimes you think, oh, you know, you guys seem okay over here. But I'm like, no, we're not okay. So I was happy that that those comments were made. And there was also another person, and it's and this is from an article from the CBC, and it says, what did the MEPs say about Trudeau? Describing Trudeau as someone who tramples fundamental human rights and freedom. So this is another person other than the lady who we saw talking. So describing Trudeau as someone who tramples fundamental human rights and freedoms. Independent Croatian MEP Mislav Kolšević said Canada once stood for civil rights, but now seems more like a dictatorship of the worst kind. Under your quasi-liberal boot in recent months, he said, we watched how you trample women with horses, how you block the bank accounts of single parents so that they can't even pay their children's education and medicine, that they can't pay utilities, mortgages for their homes.
Yeah, no, and there's another guy that went off on him too. There's like those were the two really good speeches, and she's the one that says, "Spare us your presence," as like her closing line or her punch line to really just, let's say, hit it home.
Yeah. And so, but I guess part of it too, the accusation that he loves China dictatorship, and then you bringing up that quote, I didn't know that was an actual thing. But
yeah, that quote actually goes back to 8 years ago, 2013.
Okay,
what it looks like.
Okay, yeah. But I'm glad. But for the listeners who didn't know, who might not have been following, and didn't know that this was a thing, I thought it was good that we heard how others see us, and especially him talking about Putin. Right, that's what I was like, yo, who are you to talk, man? Like, come on, man, stop this. I'm sure enough Canadians were kind of watching that. They're like, come on, man, stop it now.
Yeah, but you got enough Canadians that are like, just, oh, he's so right. Oh, bravo. Like, I agree with you, of course, but there's a bunch of people. Like, I mean, I see it today. There's people sort of mocking the protests that are still going on. Like, what freedoms have you lost? What are you talking? It's like again, let's get straw man free. Let's get serious. Let's be, this is what's frustrating, for me at least, where this show idea comes from, because the fact that people just want to hold, turn up to their team. Well, the liberals say we should do this. So therefore, we know they're respecting their rights, because otherwise it would be illegal and it'd be on the news. So I know I'm being a little ridiculous, but I just say I agree with you wholeheartedly. Unfortunately, in our own country and across the world, there's many people who are, they're authoritarians, and I would say that's because they're risk adverse. They're so risk adverse they'd rather everybody be told what to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now in regards to and then I saw this video of the Chinafication of Canada. And I thought that was an interesting word. Chinafication of Canada. And I was like, I wonder if those comments Trudeau made early in his career are telling of the future and where he stands politically in regards to the future of the country. And so there was and we'll put this link in the show notes, and it's from the Andrew Lawton show, Chinafication of Canada. And in the caption, it says, in the last 2 years, the federal government has have vastly expanded their power in the name of public health, and constitutional challenges have thus far been unsuccessful at stopping it. It still stands to be seen whether courts will condemn Justin Trudeau's invocation of the Emergencies Act, which was used to conscript tow truck drivers, limit free expression, and freeze bank accounts. And then in an Epic Times op-ed, constitutional lawyer Bryce Paradis and economist Patricia Adams write that Canada needs a new constitution Parody and Adams joined True North's The Andrew Lawton Show for an in-depth discussion about the similarities between Canada and China when it comes to social credit, press freedom, and the rise of the state. Right. And for those who don't know, Bruce Parody is the executive director of the Rights Probe and the professor of law at Queen's University. And then Patricia Adams is an economist and the president of Energy Probe Research Foundation. And so they were going back and forth about
it was a good episode. Highly recommend it.
How there's connections between. Do you think it's warranted though? Do you think the connections were warranted in regards to the idea of, because China, they have this idea of social credit. We, in a sense, because of COVID and the COVID mandate, the vaccine mandates, we're kind of they're saying that we're indirectly moving towards this idea of social credit, meaning that, for example, so if you're vaccinated, you can work for the government. You can leave the country.
Yeah, you get
these
special
kind of things.
You get special privileges.
Yes,
if you do what you're told.
Yes, and then there's the press freedom. Now in China, it's more of a heavy hand with the press freedom, and with ours, it's indirect. It's not heavy hand. It's more subsidized, where you have CBC and other outlets being subsidized by the government.
Yeah, they're openly communist, and we're not.
And then of course the rise of the state. But yeah. So what do you think, Joel?
Okay, so I think there's a lot of depth here. I'm actually going to put, I'll call it a playlist of episodes. There's a show that I don't listen to it as much anymore, but I've referenced a few episodes from it. The podcast called Hidden Forces, and there's like 4 or 5 episodes. One of them goes all the way back to 2019, even on China, that I was listening to sort of again in preparation, and I've listened to them before. But this guy, there's one of the interviews really talks about, China's approach to the world and the growth and the way that they've sort of recovered. And then there's some tying in with Taiwan, Hong Kong, all those things come up in these episodes. But the point that is an interesting that relates here is, and I don't think it was the Andrew Lawton conversation. If I'm mistaken, maybe you'll remind me. I've listened to way too many things, so sometimes where did I hear this idea from gets bled into the other one. But there's an aspect that China was part of the world economy, and China was sort of an anomaly to the world, everybody else. And there was this viewpoint that eventually China would sort of see the benefits of, let's call it democracy, and eventually assimilate with the world was the view. And if anything, right now is demonstrating to us with what's going on with Russia and the ties with China and Russia, that really that was a utopian perspective. And so, if anything, what we're seeing is that their subversive ways is actually increasing totalitarianism across the world, as opposed to our democratic ways diminishing their totalitarian. And so on a very high level, I think that the ties and the influences across the board is something that we really don't understand. And again, one of the conversations I was listening to was talking about, think about it from a media perspective. So you talked about their media being very heavy-handed.
Mm-hmm.
But what that means is not just because of the way that their whole country operates and is so heavy-handed. The ability for, let's call it, non-government news to get out, even in our news media, is very difficult, right? Obviously, when it comes to like war and their actions in war, of course, we're going to have our commentary on it. But if you're talking about the investment portfolio and, companies that are invested in with, on a, let's say, a mutual fund in Canada or a mutual fund in the States, those companies are under a heavy-handed governmental media system.
Mm-hmm.
And so the disclosures from those companies, the publications from those companies are going to be filtered through that government. And so, there was a simple statement in one of the podcasts that's something like, our news media actually propagates what their government has told, right? Like, we actually continue their propaganda. Now, obviously in a diminished way, with our commentary on it, without the, same level of concern.
Sorry. What do you mean by that?
So when their government has such an influence on their news, the ability for us in our North America to know the truth, like, let's say their media was outright lying, chances are our news media is going to repeat the lie because we don't have the ability to identify that it's a lie.
Okay.
Right. And so, I mean, the level, the reason I brought up the mutual fund stuff is one of the guys was mentioning that normally the standard level of audits that our companies would be, within a mutual fund, the level of audits that they would normally require for a Canadian or a US company, they're not requiring that from a Chinese company. And so there's little things like that play into the deception and the cloudiness that we have towards what's really going on in China. And so the point or the importance here is that China's influence is spreading, is the way that I would sort of, and the reason its influence is spreading is because people are willing to capitulate to their approach, right? Oh, you don't want your China's not letting us require an audit. Well, we want to partner with China because we think it's profitable, so we're just going to let that slide. Right? But that is perpetuating China's way of life. It's becoming influential on our investments in the example I've just laid out. And so, go back to this conversation in general, is Canada being Chinafied? I think there's a little bit of sensationalization there. But if we take the authoritarian sort of Chinese credit score concepts, yes, those things are happening here. Now, some people will point to certain things. I don't know if you've seen this link on Canada's website. There's a point about China's social credit score. But for the most part, the link is like informing Canadians how you would, interact with it if you were going over there, as opposed to, here's how we're rolling it out here. But it's easy to misinterpret what the link is saying if you're not if you just, come across the link, you're like, what this is on Canada.ca? What's going on? Okay, well, it's in the tourism section. It's under, so I just say that to, like, we need to have a sober second thought when we see something that someone's potentially sensationalized. So, yeah, what's your 2 cents on Canada being Chinafied or Chinification?
Yeah, well, I think in light of the Beijing Olympics coming up, Canada has chosen to boycott. Right?
Well, okay, so you said coming up, you mean came up.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Right?
Yeah.
But Canada's boycott was like, it was tokenism, man. It didn't mean anything. Oh, we're not going to send any delegates to do bureaucracies. Right? Like, we still send all our athletes. That's not
yeah, because because it was a diplomatic boycott. So yeah, so the athletes still go.
Right now, granted, I've heard horrible things about the living conditions and whatnot, but
because they're boycotting what was going on with the
Uyghur Muslims.
Yeah, the Uyghur Muslims.
But that was like, this is why I call it tokenism, because that came after the public was calling for something. Right? Like, this wasn't a proactive, like, if they were being proactive, it would have been months in advance before the news is really starting to ramp up. We're taking a moral position again. No. They were forced to do something because the political culture was calling for it. And so, in my opinion, I didn't take it as meaningful at all. Like, it was a joke. Now, I boycotted the Olympics.
You did?
I didn't watch a single sport, including hockey. Now, it helped that the NHL players didn't go. because
So they sent the amateurs?
Yeah, it was an amateur tournament, basically. Like, outside of the NHL, I'm sure, pros in Europe were all going. I honestly don't even know if we won. Like, I have no idea. I don't know how many medals we won. I didn't pay attention at all. China was the reason for that. I normally sort of like watch it. I care. Do we win? How are we doing? There's a couple, okay, what sports do I want to watch? I literally think I watched like 5 minutes of the decathlon where there was like a shooting thing on, where they lie down and they shoot the targets as part of the ski relay. I think it's decathlon, triathlon. I don't remember. Anyways, but I was like, both the China factor, but also, much of the bread and circus factor has always sort of turned me off of it. So normally I'm sort of like limited in my Olympic take-in. And this was just like, nope, I have no reason at all. So I would argue the citizens of Canada doing that, which I think happened on a large scale. Like a lot of people tuned into the Olympics. Like the numbers are pretty bad.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think China's a major reason for that. But I think that is way more meaningful than what Canada did as a country.
What was?
The fact that the Canadian viewers decided, I'm not watching. Now, it will be even more meaningful if the next Winter Olympics, the numbers go relatively back up. Because that will solidify that this was a signal towards the country, not we don't really care about Olympics anymore. Right? Like it's not a overall diminishing of numbers for Olympic viewership. But rather it's I refuse to watch because of China. So
wow.
it might take some time. But my point is that is way more meaningful than Canada not sending the diplomats to go eat fancy meals and have conversation.
Right. And then also want to clarify for the listeners, for those who aren't familiar. So in regards to what's going on with the Uyghur Muslims. So it says here, this is an article from the BBC, and it says China has been accused of committing crimes against humanity and possibly genocide against the Uyghur population and other mostly Muslim ethnic groups in the northwestern region of Xinjiang. Human rights groups believe China has detained more than 1 million Uyghurs against their will over the past few years in a large network of what the state calls re-education camps and sentenced the hundreds of thousands to prison terms. There is also evidence that Uyghurs are also being used as forced labor and of women being forcibly sterilized. Some former camp detainees have also alleged they were tortured and sexually abused. The U.S. is among several countries to have accused China of committing genocide in Xinjiang. The leading human rights group, Amnesty and Human Rights Watch, have published reports accusing China of crimes against humanity. Now, of course, China denies all allegations of human rights abuses in Xinjiang, claiming its system of re-education camps are there to combat separatism and Islamist militancy in the region. Yeah, so we're gonna post this clip, but it shows there's this satellite image that shows a rapid construction of campus in Xinjiang from 2015 to 2020 to now. But yeah, we'll put in the show notes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, and this is where you've got there's two major ones that came up. So I don't know if you remember, John Cena had a similar issue where he.
What do you mean?
With sort of not speaking correctly to China. Now it's a different issue, but the reason I think it had to do with either Hong Kong or Taiwan. Mm-hmm. So John Cena made some sort of comment about pro one of those two, and then had to like backtrack and apologize and said some. I remember there's like some video of him speaking, Mandarin or Cantonese or something. Sort of like, I'm sorry if I offended you, right? So, but then the relevance here is something very similar happened. I think it was with a handful of players, but it might have been an owner even.
With what?
Made a comment when they were doing like, the NBA was, I don't know if it was preseason games or they were doing a handful of games.
Daryl Morey?
Yeah, I think that's the one.
Daryl Morey. He had a tweet that criticized China.
And it was regards to sweatshops and the Uyghur Muslims, wasn't it? If I'm not mistaken.
Have to double check, but yeah.
But and the same type, like the NBA got like, it was just like, it was crazy to watch it all go down, because there was this like, it was a couple of players, because it was like one person's comment and a couple of people were starting to agree with him. The guy, like, I think it was the tweets that you were talking about. And then it was like, basically like a radio silence. No, we're shutting this down. We got to go the other direction. We need to start praising China, or we're going to lose the market, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah. Well, definitely. It put the NBA in a bad spot, because the NBA has a huge audience in China, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thanks to when Yao Ming was doing his thing in the NBA, and that helped to build the followers and the fan support in China for the NBA. And so, of course, China's a big basketball country. If y'all didn't know, they love basketball and they love their NBA, and a lot of NBA players during the off season they do tours in China to meet their fans, meet and greets and things like that, and do events. And then even some of those whose careers came to an end, they'll pick it back up in China. So there's a huge connection. So the criticism that was given by Daryl Morey, the Chinese government stopped playing when he was now that he's with the Sixers. You can't get Sixer games in China, right? Trying to send a message.
Yep. Well, and I'll go back to the Yao Ming. I worked at the Air Canada Center in that era. Man, it was insane when they came to town in Toronto.
Hi, I'm Darnell Samuels. You may remember me from such podcasts as Thanks Coach and The Sixth Sense Report. When Joel and I are not studying for the next episode, we're paying bills for hosting and production. If you want to help us out, you can make a donation of any amount by clicking the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. If you broke, don't worry about it. You can subscribe and leave us a review on your podcast catcher. If you did this already, then you can share the show with a friend. Joel, Jeezy, and I appreciate your support. Now back to our regularly scheduled program.
Oh yeah?
Like it was just like one of those games where like the doors open, the stadium's full instantly. Like everybody's just there. They want to be there as soon as the game starts. Like as soon as the doors open, right? Like normally you go to whether it's Leafs, Raptors, whatever. You get this like slow moving crowd. Everybody sort of comes and goes. They got Leaf games. It's usually doors open an hour. Raptors an hour and a half on the weekends at least.
Mm-hmm.
Like let's say it's a Sunday game, which it probably was because it's a premium game. It like an hour and a half before the game, they open the doors and this place is crowded. Like it's rammed. Like it was just, it was, a spectacle, and whether that's and I want to say like largely, a high proportion of the attendees were Chinese, right? Like there was a sort of like, cultural piece that went with him that I didn't see with any other player, which doesn't surprise me. How many Chinese NBA players there are in contrast to other countries around the world. And obviously a guy of his magnitude, right? He was a superstar just with his size alone, right?
Yeah. And yeah, that's right. And of course, and then they had Tracy McGrady back then.
So Tracy McGrady was a star. Yeah, but it's funny because even when Daryl Morey made those comments, he wasn't with the Sixers. He was actually with the Rockets, and the Rockets. If you really think about it, like kind of like I'll put it this way, the Toronto Raptors are Canada's team, right? The Houston Rockets is China's team.
I was gonna say, yeah.
So when he made those comments, the government sent a message to the commissioner of the NBA, like, look, if your guys are gonna come out here and take shots, we're gonna put a dent in your pockets. And then they were basically stopping the showing of Rockets games and things like that.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, it's interesting. It's very interesting. But this is where, we can draw some crazy parallels to the level of cancellation that the government's trying to pull. Right? Freezing of bank accounts. You're literally trying to cancel people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like if I don't have my bank account, like you're basically saying like, no, you can't participate in modern life.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that is a parallel tactic to China. Now, totally different spectrum. We're talking about sports, teams, leagues being sort of punished for their behavior by the country. But if you believe in freedom of speech, not to say that there aren't consequences for the things you say, but to essentially protest that you think the government isn't doing something you like, and the government decides to cancel you. Again, we're not, if anyone wants to go down the rabbit hole a little bit, again, all the blockades were closed. We're not talking about blockades. We're talking about protesters in Ottawa who at most deserved a parking ticket for their actions. So I think there's a lot, especially with what we've seen in the last couple months in Canada. Trudeau's comment, the reason why that quote is coming up, his praising of the basic dictatorship, is because he's continually to behave like a dictator. Now, that said, people were calling, apparently, I want to say the Toronto Star, I could get it wrong. I remember recently seeing a headline about the number of times that Stephen Harper was called a dictator. And the reason the article was there was because people were sort of dismissive or diminishing that, you calling Trudeau a dictator is, essentially like poor politics, right? Like it's sort of a degree, they're sort of calling those people with those type of criticisms, unfit for being part of the public discourse. But, that's not something new, is my point here. But at least I would say that Trudeau's behavior at the minimum has trended towards dictator type of behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, for those who are wondering what Morey said that caused the firestorm, so he said this was like October 4th, a couple of years ago. Let me see what year is it? 2019. And Morey said, he said, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong."
Yes,
So
you're
an
right. It was a Hong
image
Kong
with a
comment.
slogan. Yeah. So shared the image, the slogan, "Fight for freedom, stand with Hong Kong." Now it's crazy because it wasn't anything like, wow, just that alone caused the firestorm with China and the NBA. And even now, fast forward to today, the issue is more so with the sneaker deals that the NBA players have in China, right? So I think it's about 15 players in the NBA have shoe deals with China. Lucrative, I should also add, lucrative shoe deals. When I was looking at this, I was like, wait, well, but so the main shoe companies, for those who follow who are sneakerheads, there's like Li Ning, Anta, Peak, and 361. And so for example, Dwayne Wade, who's probably the top guy out of the 15,
And Jimmy Butler's not bad.
Jimmy Butler has a deal?
Yeah, he's on this list. So it's there's an ESPN article that's in the
Okay. I didn't realize. Okay. So Dwayne Wade's deal is 10 years, 75 mil.
Dude,
He's not playing basketball anymore. And so what, and I guess and part of it too is so I don't know,
Van Fleet's on this list.
Really?
Eh? Yeah, man.
But Van Fleet signed with M1. Who's he signing with?
Okay, well, so this article's dated. What's the article? Anta, I think. Let me just double check.
Oh, really? Okay. Well.
No,
anyway.
Ning. Li Ning.
Yeah, Li Ning. So now Dwayne Wade's. Dwayne Wade basically they let him turn the shoe deal into like a signature deal, where he kind of has his own signature brand called the Way of Wade.
Mm-hmm.
Which I kind of like the kicks. But 10 years, 75 mil, and then what's his name? The shooting guard for the Golden State Warriors, Klay Thompson. He signed with Anta, and he has a 10-year, 80 mil. And so the reason, and then the president of the Players Association, CJ McCollum, he opted out of his Nike deal to sign with a China shoe company. And so I bring that up to let you know, like, yeah, these are lucrative deals, because sometimes you're like, oh, I don't, you only sign with Nike or any name brand, Jordan, whatever. But because the deals are so lucrative, in your mind, you're like, well, yeah, why not opt out of? Because before Dwayne Wade was signed to Team Jordan, and then he came out of that contract, which I'm like, well, what's better than Team Jordan? Well, Team Li Ning. and so now
trying to create your own Jordans.
Yeah, right. And so the question I'm bringing up now is, the push is now telling these NBA players to cancel those contracts with China because it's being connected to
the Uyghur Muslims,
forced labor, and the forced labor and so forth. And so Enes Kanter Freedom, player in the NBA, he's been really outspoken. He's more like politically right leaning, and he's not part of the good old boys club. He's actually of Turkish descent. And yeah, so he's made it his thing as a player to be outspoken on political issues from a conservative right perspective, calling out LeBron, calling out Jordan, calling out whoever he's got to call out for their hypocrisy. But I guess for the listener and for you, Joel, and us thinking like, okay, if somebody came to you and said, hey, we want you to end that deal. We want you to end your deal with Li Ning, Anta, Peak, or 361, right? You're like, oh, whoa, what? Huh? Well, hold on. What proof do you have of this? What do you mean? Is this us just going with the flow? Is like, or do you like, what do you do at that point?
No, it's a fair, like, I mean, these players that are in these deals, what does that even mean, right? Like, can you break the deal? What's the escape clause on the deal? Do you basically, by you getting out of the deal, does that mean you just don't get paid? Like, again, it all, there's a contract here, right? Like, so I get the impetus behind it, but sometimes those things are, easier said than done. Let's put it that way, right? Like, let's say Dwayne Wade's, right? If Wade somehow says, like, I want to walk away, who's got rights to the name? Right? Can they still make his shoe even if he decides to walk away? They just don't get to use his name, his him in the advertising. Now, park all that, because it's still a fair question. But really, my initial thought was, I wonder how many of these players even thought about these things when they signed the deal. And the reason I asked that question is, especially the NBA, there's a a demonstration that we care about social justice issues. And I can have a little bit of grace for, if you take, I'll put in the show notes page the guy, the Warriors owner, part owner, Chamath. I can't say his last name, but he's the SPAC investor for anyone who's in that world. He was basically like, nobody cares. Now, if I want to give a little grace or a little bit of, what is he saying? Well, these things are so far removed from us. Like, I care more about what's happening in my neighborhood than like halfway around the country. And I get that. Said, yeah. I totally get that. Right? Like, but if your brand is to be about social justice issues, right? Let's take LeBron, who's sort of going down that brand, or he's adding that to his brand. If you're going to sign a contract with somebody, you probably should make sure that they align with your brand. And so that's why because when it went through my mind was like, how many of these players thought about country, the company that they're signing with, and the potential issues? And I can almost guarantee you, none of them even thought, like, these things didn't cross their mind. And the reason I say that is because now when they get when they get positioned or pushed by this, let's say Enes Kanter, Freedom, when he's pushing them on these issues, I'm sure there's a level of like cognitive dissonance or, nah, man, it's not that bad. Like, you don't know what you're talking about, right? Like, they don't want to know. Because if they knew, I can almost guarantee you they would walk away from those deals.
Yeah. Well, okay, let me ask you about your 2 cents regarding the Chinafication of Canada. Is it? Do you feel like we're moving towards that? That's what's actually happening?
So, as soon as Canada started freezing bank accounts, I posted a comment on Facebook, something to the effect, if you live in Canada, there's never been a better time, or there's never been a more important time to get a VPN. So for those who don't know, VPN's virtual private network. Essentially, if you want to protect your computer when you're accessing public Wi-Fi, a VPN is what most people would use as a means to protect their, computer from being someone else on the same network. But a VPN does more than that too. I can make it appear as if I'm in America, and now I can watch American Netflix. But anyways, that's a different purpose for it. The idea, though, is that you actually protect your internet activity through a VPN. Literally, I bought a 2-year subscription to a VPN. Though, as soon as that happened. Not because I'm personally concerned that I did anything wrong, but my government is not trustworthy. Just bottom line. I don't trust them. Why would I? Mm-hmm. They have not acted trustworthy. I would say China's government is not trustworthy. China's government looks out for themselves. From a biblical perspective, from a constitutional perspective, what is the role of a government is not to look out for themselves. It's to look out for the people, to serve the people. Canada's government is trending farther and farther away from serving its people and serving itself. So in that sense, I would say, have we become Chinafied? No. Is there a Chinafication going on? Yes. Is it specifically related to China? That's a different question. I don't necessarily know. But we are trending to become more like China in its managing of its people to do what they want because they believe they know better, as opposed to the will of the people. Mm-hmm. They want to impose their will on the people. What about you? What's your 2 cents on that? Do you think Canada's being? I'll ask it a different way. Is becoming more authoritarian, more communist?
I think I don't think that Canada's being Chinafied. I think Canada is evolving into what it's going to be. We've talked about this.
I'd use the word devolving, but continue. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, the charter, like they said on the Andrew Lawton show, the charter is not working, right? There's some inefficiencies in it, and so the government's has been taking advantage of it, and so as they've been taking advantage of it, yeah, the government's been able to grow, and they've been able to work around the charter to like freeze bank accounts and all kinds of foolishness, right? And so I don't think it's necessarily the Chinafication. I just think it's the progression of our government and the weakness of our foundation and our constitution, right? There's holes in it, and so that's what we're seeing. But I won't go as far as to say it's being Chinafied per se. Like there are some connections, but correlation doesn't necessarily mean causation, type of thing. But is that reason for us to worry? I wouldn't necessarily be alarmed to say, oh, we're becoming like China, but we're becoming like something, and it isn't good. I don't think we have to scare people to say, oh, become like China. Well, no, it's already scaring. It's already scary on what we're seeing in the direction that we're going. So I would say no, Canada is not being Chinafied.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. Slightly different words. I think we're saying roughly the same thing. I'm saying yes, you're saying no, but we're saying we're trending the direction we're trending in. I think we're in agreement, whether we call that Chinafication or not. I think is semantics to some extent. And the whole digital ID, social credit score, all those things, like I think there is conversations to be had there, but I think it gets so sensationalized, right? Like our digital ID we already carry around in our pocket, right? Like there's not much different other than, yes, if the government mandates it and forces it and now ties everything to it, sure, it becomes the key to the social credit score system. But all the current things that the government wants to do to spy on you through your technology, it's already possible. Now, they might need a warrant if they're following the rule of law, but the functions or the things that can be done already could happen because you walk around with a tracking device in your pocket all day long. Yeah, I think it's hopefully. I mean, I would say for the listener, where did we not touch this topic properly? I think there's a lot of economic conversation to be had, and maybe we need to get a Chinese economy expert on. If you check out the Hidden Forces podcast episodes that I'll put in the show notes page, a few of those touch on that. So if that's your interest, I would definitely recommend those episodes out to check those out. So
yeah, let us know what you guys think. Let us know your 2 cents.
6 cents makes change.
But you heard me? Does that make sense?
Madden and Mitchell Media.